Of ICA, and all I'm here to do is introduce some panels and some other expert speakers. So the format for the next hour and a half will be that we have a moderated panel, which I'll let the panel members talk to you through in a moment. Then we've got a case study session with Jeff White, and then we've got some roundtables where we'll spread around the room and have some topical discussions. You can feel free to join in whichever ones of those you feel most appropriate. So for now, I will just introduce Steve Young, who's going to be moderating the panel here. Steve is CEO of the Association of Corporate Investigators, has a vast amount of experience in both law enforcement and corporate financial crime preventions across all manner of subject matter areas. So I will now be quiet. Hand over to you, Steve. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Rob. Good morning, everyone. So you've absolutely picked the right track for sure. Just two quick points of order. I speak with a Northern Irish accent. People come up to me and say, "What part of Canada are you from?" Listen, I was in Montreal 20 years ago for 3 days. Personally, I didn't think it was long enough to pick up the accent, but that's what happens. The other point of order is I'm not following Twitter. I know some of you doing, what's he doing? He's supposed to be moderating. The organizers, ICA, are very big and ask me if you've got questions, if you go to the Swap Card app, by all means, fire questions. So the topic of the panel this morning is what makes the criminal of 2024. It's a big topic. I'm joined by four absolutely amazing people who are going to give us their views. So by way of introduction, Sharon, I'm going to come to you first.
Fantastic, thank you, and hope everybody can hear me. I'm Sharon Corbin. For the last 5 years, I've been the head of financial crime prevention at Shell Trading and Supply. So that's the commodities trading business within Shell. So as you can all imagine, a very complex, highly regulated, highly scrutinized industry. And you know, we've been going on a bit of a journey. Prior to joining Shell, I was 20 years at Deloitte, where I was in the forensic financial crime team. I was a director in the forensic financial crime team. So I've worked in a wide range of industries, but as I've just mentioned, latterly in the complex world of oil and gas.
Thank you, Sharon. Anu.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. Delighted to be at the conference, and thanks to ICA. So in terms of my introduction, I've been in the financial service industry for 21 plus years, worked with banks around London, at HSBC, Barclays, Deutsche, UBS, Santander, and now at Bank of New York Mellon. I head up the regulatory change function across EMEA FCC, and also I'm the AML lead for our global transformation program. So looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Anna. And to Rebecca.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you very much for having me this morning. I'm Rebecca Cummings. I lead the financial crime practice at Avise Partners. I work with a number of different types of clients in an advisory capacity in terms of supporting them with enhancing their financial crime systems and controls, but also as part of the skilled person panel we're on for Lottie Financial Crime. So we'll also go on behalf of the regulator and conduct skilled person reviews to assess firm systems and controls and the adequacy of those. I've been in consulting now for almost a decade, and prior to that I was at Lloyds Banking Group in their commercial banking division, so have the kind of in-house experience and was working in their fraud and financial crime team, and I also had experience of dealing with regulatory projects very much from the other side when Lloyds were going through their own regulatory scrutiny, let's say. So yeah, looking forward to the discussion this morning.
Thank you, Rebecca. Jermaine.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jermaine Frew. I'm the Vice President of AML for Bank of America. And for my sins, my team leads the AML controls across 38 jurisdictions across the EMEA region. Prior to that, I have 21 years experience for Santander, where I've done a variety of different roles across the economic crime functions. But really happy to be amongst an esteemed panel here today, and I'm looking forward to making a positive contribution towards our discussion.
Thank you, Jermaine. So let's get straight into it. So I'm going to come to Sharon, first of all, to ask the exam question, the panel topic, because for me it's going to be interesting to hear from an oil company. What makes a criminal of 2024, Sharon?
Thank you, Steve. It's a big question. And before I start, I'll just say that obviously the views that I'll say today are my own and not necessarily those of the company that I work for. A huge question. I think, what we've heard this morning from the panels, and I'm sure we'll hear throughout the day that, we're in an age of, where fraud is rife. We're in an age where, criminals are getting more sophisticated with their use of technology. They're utilising things that we've never seen them utilise before. And I think everybody can relate to that. But what I will say, and perhaps controversially, is that a good old-fashioned criminal hasn't evolved that much. What I see in my space and what I see when I look at enforcement actions, in my industry and other corporates, not necessarily financial services, is that good old-fashioned criminal still exists. Ultimately they want something we don't have. They either, they want power, they want money, they're greedy, they want, something, and they'll go to any lengths to get it. So moving cash around, falsifying documents, setting up fraudulent companies, bribing people, in bathrooms of corporate events, it all still goes on. And you see it in black and white in the enforcement actions. I see it in terms of some of the incidents and threats that come my way as the head of financial crime prevention. And so whilst, yes, we have to be vigilant for the evolved criminal and the sophisticated one, those good old-fashioned ones, I would say, are still out there. And we have to, keep looking for them and keep trying to prevent what they're doing.
Thank you, Sharon. So I know you're doing the regulatory piece. Is regulation keeping up? And what, in your view, makes a criminal 2024?
My mom is a virologist, so I'm going to explain this in terms of virology. I think criminal trends and crime is like a virus. It keeps spreading, and as scientists, we come up with inventions with new vaccines, but then the virus mutates itself and comes up in different shapes and forms, and then we try to find different, more innovative ways of stopping the spread of that virus. So I think crime also manifests in different forms. And that is what the challenge is. It's like a virus.
Thank you. And Jermaine?
Yeah, I'd build upon Anu's point. I really like the virus analogy, and I think one of the typologies that we see is this piece around citizenship by investment. Each year, thousands of citizens across the world are able to obtain new ID documents by virtue of investing in different jurisdictions. And I think I ask myself in the AML space, how does that actually impact our KYC and AML determination? So if I'm Jermaine through a UK citizen and I've got a UK passport, how is that going to be different to, I'm still Jermaine through, but I now have a Portuguese passport, for example. So that's something that we're seeing in our space in terms of the risk around citizenship by investment. So you still have the same person, but it's almost, rather than money laundering, it's almost ID laundering. And I think that's an interesting typology that I think is going to grow and evolve as we go through 2024.
Thank you, Jermaine. And Rebecca, you've got the advantage of being able to perhaps give us sort of a cross-industry view based on what you do. What makes a criminal in 2024?
Yeah, I mean, excuse me, I'd like to build on some of the points that Sharon made, and I think you're right, the traditional criminal is still there, but I think it's about using different methods in which to, launder those funds or commit the criminal act, the predicate offences. And so I think, we are seeing organised crime gangs, for example, that are using kind of, social injustices or vulnerabilities and exploiting those for their purposes and profiting from that. So I'm sure we'll come onto it as we kind of go into the discussion, but around, human trafficking, using the crisis that we've seen, in Ukraine and Gaza and other, countries where we're seeing immigration and exploiting that issue. And then, the use of technology. So whilst, we very much see organised crime gangs using technology, it's more accessible for those that may not have turned to crime previously. And that is, again, exploited because of cost of living crisis, where more people are turning to crime that may not have turned to crime previously. And I think we're also seeing, and it was mentioned, I think, in the session this morning, an uptick in insider fraud, internal fraud, where you've got, people working within organisations that may not have turned to criminal activity previously that are now perhaps doing so, either because they have been, brought into that through organised crime gangs, or because of cost of living crisis, they're finding other ways to kind of meet their own needs, if you like. So I think that's some of the trends that we're seeing, and I'm sure we'll come onto that in a bit more detail.
So thank you, Rebecca. So what I'm going to move is this sort of talk about this sort of geopolitical situation and how it's impacting financial crime. I mean, certainly in my lifetime, I've never known the world to be, I don't know if unstable is the right word, but it's fair to say there's a lot going on. So Sharon, back to you as Shell. I mean, your company's got a massive footprint around the world and working in some complex jurisdictions. How do you see the current geopolitical situation impacting the financial crime trends?
Absolutely, yeah, Steve. I mean, as you've alluded, Steve, I think everybody can relate. Commodities are not sourced typically in the lower risk jurisdictions. We operate globally. We're moving, physical commodities around the world. It's complex, and the geopolitical environment influences everything we do. Everything. From the threats that we face, from the regulations that that we have to comply with. Even to what we can buy and sell, where we can buy and sell it, how we can buy and sell it. And so, I would say it's probably one of the key drivers of the risk in our organisation, where we operate and the stability of those jurisdictions. And as we all know, conflict, instability, vulnerable nations, that's where criminals prosper and thrive. And so we have, and we do, I do work in a heavily scrutinised, controversial industry at times. I don't think anybody can deny that. There's lots going on. We're buying and selling things. We're investing in renewable energies, and we're working with a lot of, government, owned entities. Commodities are controlled by governments in the vast majority of nations for obvious reasons. So when there's conflict, when there's war, when there's civil unrest, when there's changes of government, that creates additional threats and vulnerabilities in those systems that we have to really keep on top of. And so what I would say is, our key thing, in my team, as the head of financial crime prevention, is we have to continually understand what those threats are. The threats from 2 years ago or 6 months ago are not the threats that we might face today. When I arrived at Shell in 2019, we were going through a bit of a financial crime transformation journey. We were looking at our counterparties, doing KYC, focusing on money laundering, bribery, and corruption. That's not our biggest risk today. It's now sanctions and sanctions evasion, as many of you will also be facing. We have complex trade controls and trade compliance rules that we have to follow, right down to the ships that we can use, the products that we can buy and sell, where we can source them from, and of course the traditional things around counterparty and not dealing with sanctioned parties. So all of that has to come together, and you have to have the right knowledge of those threats, and then the risk appetite to go alongside that. Our risk appetite evolves weekly. I sit twice a week in high-risk counterparty committee with the CEO of my company and my boss, the Chief Compliance Officer, and we work through on a detailed level, transaction by transaction. Is it legal? And then is it ethical? Is it wise? All of these things play into that geopolitical context. It changes so rapidly, and we have to really adapt and evolve as that does. Complex area, and it will continue to be complex for us, as you can imagine. I'll leave it there, but then
thank you, Sharon. Jermaine, I'm going to turn to you because you, like probably many of the folks in the audience, AML risk is probably right up there. In terms of what you do in the money laundering space, the geopolitical environment as it stands today, what have you seen as the sort of impacts on financial crime?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. I think I agree with you, Steve, that the world has never been more complex and volatile and uncertain and ambiguous as it is today. And I grew up in an era where you had two superpowers, East and West, and it was pretty stable. And as Sharon's spoken about, where we've got this complex, ambiguous, volatile world, we've got bad actors. So an example of that in the UK is this situation that we see with regards to so-called small boat crisis, whereby we've got citizens or people trying to get across the channel who have been trafficked. And it makes me think, well, what is the magnetic pull of the UK? And when we look at the UK high street and we view the businesses that we have on our high street versus pre-COVID, what I'm seeing and what we're seeing is that there are much more cash-intensive businesses. So I'm talking about your small barbershops, your nail salons, bubble tea shops. If you go to Oxford Street, you've got a wave, a suite of sweet shops, etc. And these businesses are not inherently criminal, but they do mask criminality, and some of that criminality plays out in people's lives in terms of people being trafficked to work into these industries. And I guess just going right the way back, it's the geopolitical instability that's giving an environment whereby people traffickers and bad actors can do what we see on in English Channel, and also in our local high streets. Like I said, I've seen an explosion in cash-intensive businesses. I'll give you a short anecdote. I live in a small village on the edge of London. It's got a village school, small population. Why have we got 2 barbershops? And so these things are all around us, these cash-intensive businesses, which make it hard for banks and the public sector to really understand the trail of the money, etc.